The observation chamber stretched before her like a cathedral of stars, its curved walls transparent to the void beyond. Caliph stood motionless, her silver robes pooling around her feet like liquid metal, watching the feeds from 14 different worlds simultaneously. It was a skill she'd perfected over 3 centuries, the ability to witness multiple tragedies at once without feeling any of them too deeply. Her long ears, elegant and pointed, twitched slightly as she isolated one feed. A human colony world, designation KX-447, though the inhabitants called it something charmingly primitive. New Providence. How optimistic. The humans were always naming things as if hope could be encoded into syllables. The battle unfolding on the northern continent was unremarkable by imperial standards. 2 human factions arguing over resources, firing weapons that would have been considered adorably primitive by Vaylorn children. She should have moved on to more pressing matters: the grain shortage on Velcro's Prime, the disputed mining rights in the Andara system. But something held her attention. One soldier specifically. "Your Radiance, the Council awaits your presence." The voice belonged to Advisor Moltuz, who had perfected the art of sounding urgent about everything. "They can continue waiting," Caliph replied, her eyes tracking the human's movements. "I'm conducting research." "You've been conducting research on that particular feed for 6 hours. Your point." Moltuz wisely chose silence. Caliph magnified the image, watching as the human soldier, Operative Thorne, according to the data scroll, executed a maneuver that should have been impossible with his species' limited reflexes. He dove beneath plasma fire, rolled, and came up firing, taking out 3 hostiles while simultaneously pulling a wounded civilian behind cover. "He's going to die," she murmured, more to herself than Moltuz. "His squad is gone. He's outnumbered 40 to 1. He should retreat." But Thorne didn't retreat. He advanced, drawing fire toward himself and away from the cluster of civilians huddled in what remained of a residential structure. There was something almost mathematical about his movements, a brutal efficiency that reminded her of the ancient Vaylorn warriors before they'd evolved past such necessities. "Fascinating," she whispered. "He knows he's dying. Look at his vitals, he knows, but he's recalculating the odds for everyone else." A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder. Caliph's hand moved involuntarily toward the display, as if she could somehow reach through space and time to steady him. He stumbled, blood darkening his tactical vest, but kept moving. Another bolt grazed his leg. "Your Radiance, perhaps we should." "Be quiet, Moltuz." The feed showed a child, no more than 7 standard years old, frozen in terror as a hostile soldier advanced. Thorne was 30 meters away, bleeding, barely standing. The mathematics were simple. He couldn't reach her in time. Physics wouldn't allow it. He tried anyway. The sprint should have killed him from blood loss alone. The dive he made, throwing his body between the child and the plasma blast, definitely should have killed him. The energy weapon discharged at point-blank range, and Caliph watched. Her empire's Empress, ruler of 700 worlds, holder of the eternal mandate, as this human did something so stupidly, magnificently brave that she felt her chest tighten in a way it hadn't in 200 years. The blast hit him full force. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, but his arms remained locked around the child, shielding her even in unconsciousness. "Get a medical team to those coordinates," Caliph ordered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Now, Your Radiance, Protocol 17 explicitly forbids." "I am Protocol 17. She turned to face Moltuz, and something in her expression made the ancient advisor step back. "Dispatch the team. Tell them to be discreet. And if you mention regulations to me again, you'll be conducting research on atmospheric pressure from the outside of this ship." Moltuz fled. Alone again, Caliph returned her gaze to the feed, watching as her medical team materialized in stealth mode around Thorne's broken body. She touched the transparent wall, her reflection ghostly against the stars. "What have you done to me?" she whispered to the unconscious human below. Caliph had reviewed the footage 63 times. She told herself it was academic curiosity, a study in human behavioral patterns under extreme duress. She told Moltaz the same thing when he'd caught her watching it at 3 in the morning, ship time, her eyes reflecting the glow of the holographic display. "You're lying to yourself," Moltaz had said, which was why she kept him around despite his irritating habit of being correct. Now, 4 days after the extraction, she stood outside the medical bay, her hand hovering over the access panel. Inside, Thorne was recovering at a rate that had surprised even her chief physician. Humans were supposedly fragile, yet this one had metabolized Valorn's cellular regeneration treatments, as if his body had been waiting for them. "He's been asking questions," the physician had reported that morning. "Many questions, primarily about where he is, what happened to the civilians, and whether we're planning to dissect him for science." "That last one seems reasonable," Caliph had replied. "He also asked if we have coffee. I didn't know what that was, so I told him we'd dissect him if he didn't stop asking." "You didn't." "I did," he laughed. "Your radiance. I believe this human may be damaged in the cognitive regions." The door slid open before she could reconsider. Thorne sat on the edge of the medical bed, wearing a recovery suit that the medical team had synthesized to approximate human clothing. He looked up as she entered, and she noticed his eyes were brown, the color of the fertile soil on agricultural worlds. Strange, the details that suddenly seemed important. "So," he said, his voice rough but steady, "are you the head elf, or is there an even fancier elf I need to talk to?" Caliph blinked. In 300 years no one had ever called her an elf. "I am Empress Caliph, sovereign of the Valorn Empire, keeper of." "Right, head elf." "Got it." He stood, wobbling slightly, and she noticed the faint scars on his shoulder and leg where plasma had torn through flesh. Her medical team had done excellent work. "Look, I appreciate the magical healing and the nice room with the walls that glow for some reason, but I need to get back. There are people depending on me." "They're safe," Caliph said, moving closer despite herself. "The civilians you protected survived. The hostile forces have been neutralized." "By who?" "By forces you wouldn't understand. Try me, I'm tougher than I look." He grinned, and she realized he was joking despite having nearly died saving strangers. "Actually, I look pretty tough right now, so let me rephrase. I'm smarter than I look." "That's a low bar to clear," she replied, surprising herself. Was she actually engaging in banter? "Oh, she's got jokes. The Space Empress has jokes." Thorne sat back down, running a hand through his dark hair. "Okay, cards on the table. What's happening here? Because either I died and this is a very weird afterlife, or I'm in a coma dreaming about elves in space, or aliens are real and apparently they've been watching us like we're some kind of reality show." "The third option," Caliph admitted, "though we prefer the term observational protocols rather than reality show." "Potato, potato." He studied her face, his gaze uncomfortably direct. Humans weren't supposed to look at her like this, as if she were simply another person rather than an icon of imperial authority. "So why break your protocols for me? I'm nobody special." "You threw yourself in front of a plasma weapon to save a child you'd never met." "Yeah, well," he shrugged, wincing slightly. "Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Probably should have thought it through better." "Most beings across the galaxy would have run." "Most beings across the galaxy sound pretty boring." Before she could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. Moltaz's voice crackled through the comm system, tight with panic. "Your Radiance, we have a situation. The High Council has learned of the humans' presence. They're demanding immediate audience." Thorne looked at her. "That sounds bad." "It's complicated." "Is complicated better or worse than bad?" "Significantly worse," Caliph admitted, and realized she just involved herself in the first genuine crisis of her reign that wasn't about trade routes or territorial disputes. This was about her, about choice, about the loneliness she'd carried like armor suddenly feeling less like protection and more like a prison. "Well," Thorne said, standing again with that reckless grin. This should be interesting. The council chamber materialized around them in layers of hard light and ancient stone, a deliberate fusion of technology and tradition meant to intimidate. Thorne whistled low. Okay, this is either very impressive or someone has a serious interior design problem. Silence would serve you well here, Caliph murmured, though something in his irreverence steadied her nerves. She'd faced down warlords and negotiated with hive minds, but the 12 faces staring at her from their elevated platforms made her feel like a child caught stealing sweets. The Empress graces us with her presence, Lord Vethris began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. And she brings a pet. I'm more of a stray, actually, Thorne interjected. She found me in a ditch, very charitable of her. Caliph felt something unexpected bubble up in her chest. Was that laughter? She suppressed it, maintaining her imperial composure. Operative Thorne is here under my direct protection. I've invoked Article 47 of the... Article 47 hasn't been used in over 1,000 years, Moltha said from his position near the chamber entrance. His tone was apologetic but firm. Your Radiance, perhaps if you explained your reasoning, the council would understand. My reasoning is my own. Your reasoning affects 700 worlds, Vethris countered. We have protocols, we have laws. You, better than anyone, have upheld these laws for 3 centuries. Why throw them away for one human? Thorne raised his hand like a student in class. Can I answer that? No, Caliph and Vethris said simultaneously. I'm going to anyway. Thorne stepped forward, ignoring the ripple of shock that ran through the council. Apparently humans weren't supposed to move without permission. Look, I get it. You've got your rules, your systems. You've probably been doing the same thing for so long you've forgotten why you started doing it in the first place. But here's the thing about rules. Sometimes they're just excuses for not making hard choices. This human dares lecture the High Council. Another lord, whose name Caliph couldn't immediately recall, rose from his seat. This is precisely why the protocols exist. Lesser species cannot comprehend the complexities of... I comprehended that plasma bolt just fine, Thorne interrupted. Felt pretty complex when it was burning through my shoulder. But I also comprehended that a kid was about to die, and I had maybe 3 seconds to decide if I was going to be the kind of person who runs or the kind who doesn't. Your Empress made the same choice. Maybe that's what's really bothering you. The chamber fell silent. Caliph stared at Thorne, her mind racing. How did this human, who couldn't possibly understand the weight of her position, somehow articulate exactly what she'd been feeling? The human dies, Vethris declared, or your radiance abdicates. Those are the only acceptable outcomes. There's a third option, Caliph said quietly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I declare humanity a threshold species. They're no longer subjects of observation but potential equals, which means this human stands here not as a specimen but as a guest of the Empire. That's insane, Vethris sputtered. They barely have interstellar capability. They still wage wars over resources. So did we once. Caliph moved to stand beside Thorne, a deliberate positioning that wasn't lost on anyone present. I've watched them for decades. I've seen their capacity for growth, for sacrifice, for hope in the face of extinction. Operative Thorne isn't an anomaly. He's an example of what they're becoming. Or, Thorne added helpfully, I'm just incredibly lucky and you're all overthinking this. Despite everything, Caliph felt her lips twitch. Stop helping. Can't, it's apparently what I do. Moltha stepped forward, his ancient face creased with concern. Your Radiance, if you proceed with this declaration, there will be consequences. Factions will divide. Some worlds may rebel. Everything you've built could fracture. Then let it fracture, Caliph said, and meant it. I've spent 300 years being alone at the top of an empire. I've made every correct decision, followed every protocol, sacrificed every personal desire for the greater good. And this human, who's known me for approximately 7 minutes, made me laugh. When was the last time any of you managed that? They stood in the observation chamber, the same place where Caliph had first watched Thorne nearly die. 2 weeks had passed since the council meeting, 2 weeks of political maneuvering and carefully worded declarations. The empire hadn't fractured, not yet, though several lords had made their displeasure abundantly clear. "So this is where you watch your cosmic soap operas," Thorne said, gazing out at the stars. He'd adapted to ship life with unsettling ease, asking questions about everything from the gravity generators to the food synthesizers. The medical staff had started hiding when they saw him coming. "I prefer to call it strategic observation," Caliph replied. She'd found herself spending more time in this chamber, partly because it helped her think, mostly because Thorne kept finding her here. "Right, strategic." He pointed at one of the feeds showing a marketplace on a distant world. "Is it strategic to watch that vendor argue with customers for 20 minutes? He has an interesting negotiation style." "You were lonely." Thorne said it simply, without judgment, and Caliph felt something in her chest constrict. "That's why you saved me. Not because I'm special or humanity's next evolutionary step or whatever. You were just tired of being alone." "That's reductive. Doesn't make it wrong." He turned to face her, and she was struck again by how direct his gaze was. 300 years of people averting their eyes, and this human looked at her like she was just another person. "For what it's worth, I get it. I spent most of my life in the military, always moving, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. Then suddenly I'm here, in a spaceship with an alien empress who apparently threw away her entire political capital because I made her laugh." "I didn't throw it away," Caliph protested. "I redistributed it." "You're bad at lying. Has anyone told you that?" "Frequently, usually Moltas." "Smart guy that Moltas." Thorne moved closer, studying her face with unnerving focus. "So what happens now? I'm guessing your people expect you to send me back eventually. Return the human to his habitat, lessons learned, everyone moves on." "They do expect that, yes." "And what do you want?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Caliph had ruled an empire by knowing exactly what she wanted at all times, by never hesitating, never doubting. But this human with his terrible jokes and his reckless courage had somehow made her question 3 centuries of certainty. "I want," she began carefully, "to offer you a choice. You can return to your world. I'll ensure you're honored as a hero, given resources beyond measure. You'll live well, die old, be remembered. Or you stay here with me." The words came out softer than she'd intended. "I need someone who understands humans, now that I've declared them threshold species. An advisor who can help me navigate this new relationship between our peoples." "That's a terrible excuse," Thorne said, but he was smiling. "I know. You really just don't want to be alone anymore. I know that too." He laughed, and the sound echoed through the vast chamber. "You're asking me to give up my entire species, my world, everything I've ever known, to stay on a spaceship and argue with alien politicians. When you phrase it like that, it sounds unappealing. It sounds insane." He paused, his expression shifting to something more serious. "But I died down there, or I should have. Instead, I woke up in a place that shouldn't exist, met an empress who shouldn't care, and apparently became a catalyst for interstellar policy reform. My old life doesn't really fit anymore." "Is that a yes?" "It's a let's see what happens." He extended his hand, a human gesture she'd learned meant agreement. "But fair warning, I'm going to keep making terrible jokes, I'm going to question everything, and I'm going to be absolutely useless at court etiquette." Caliph took his hand, feeling the warmth of human skin against her own. "I'm counting on it." Behind them, the feeds continued cycling through 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 stories. But for the first time in 300 years, Caliph wasn't watching them alone. Moltas had been right, as always. She'd been lying to herself about the research, about the protocols, about everything except the one truth she'd been avoiding. Power was meaningless without someone to share it with. "So," Thorne said, still holding her hand, What's the first crisis we're tackling together? Lord Vethris is already planning a vote of no confidence. 3 colonies are demanding explanations about humanity's new status, and the grain shortage on Velcro's Prime has somehow gotten worse. Sounds like Tuesday. He grinned at her confusion. Human expression. Means it's just another day. Then perhaps, Caliph said, feeling something unfamiliar and wonderful spreading through her chest. Hope, she realized, or maybe just relief. We should face it together. The stars watched them, as they'd watched everything for eons, and the lonely Empress who'd broken every rule finally understood what she'd been searching for all along. The silence was answer enough. So here's my decision, she continued, her voice carrying the full weight of imperial authority. Thorne stays. Humanity gets reclassified, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can file a formal complaint with someone who cares. Vethris's face darkened. This isn't over. It never is, Caliph agreed. She turned to Thorne. We should leave before I